Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Geekwatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me are my two brothers here in the temple. In the red corner, the man guiding you through all of your VTubers and venturing into the weird and wonderful world of YouTube Shorts lately, good brother John. And in the other red corner, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zendari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, Good Brothers Anatrix.
Zendari Enterprises would like to remind you that even if you're not a baseball fan, go Dodgers, because HoloLive was there, and holy fuck, that drone show was good.
Mm-hmm. So I just hope the Dodgers can actually use that momentum instead of overmanaging vis-a-vis Dave Roberts for the umpteenth time.
I mean, they did win that game, so...
Yeah.
Clearly something worked.
And look, I'd rather have the if it means having the Yankees eat shit, then that is a happy day for me. Look, as I've said before, every sport has teams that are my whipping boys, and esports is just as much, though I don't cover it as much as I used to. But in baseball, there are two whipping boys that I have, and both of them are in New York.
Mm-hmm.
One of them's the Yankees, because everybody hates the Yankees. The other is the Mets. But I don't hate the Mets, I just laugh at them.
So literally, as we're talking about this, I see a tweet. Apparently, there were some people who didn't quite get what was going on when they saw Gargoyle on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Until she started singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
Yeah, I know.
Apparently, there was a lot of confusion in the crowd, but I kind of expected that, honestly.
I saw Armchair Expert's stream where he talked about that article in the Times, and he was a bit cautious because he felt that some of the wording in it was not putting things in the best light. Then again, it's the LA Times and it's a journalist, so remember, folks, you don't hate journalists enough. You think you do, but you don't.
Oh, I hate journalists more than them.
And it had more. It wasn't anything insidious. It just had to do with the framing of VTubing as this other that got his attention. Though he did also call out that some people have looked at that article and overcompensated.
Hmm.
You know, in the sense that, and this is something I think should be taken into account. There are good tourists and bad tourists. Good tourists are essentially window shoppers that could potentially be made into fans. And those are the ones who can properly articulate their perspective and allow for things that they don't agree with. Bad ones are the ones who wish to pervert something or wish to be activists, of course. Basically use it as a vehicle for themselves. But
Yeah.
we are getting off the rails. So, guidance. You've heard me talk about it. You've heard Zan talk about it ad nauseum. I feel like I bring it up in one form or another on every stream that I do, in some form or another. And to some that may be a little bit annoying, but I say I will stop doing it when the message finally sinks in about its importance.
Essentially, the beatings will continue until morale has improved.
Yes. Now, what I mean by guidance has to do with a bit of an issue that I've seen where there, in a lot of gaming mediums, whether it be video games, whether it be tabletop games, whether it be war games, there seems to be this Great Wall of China Great Wall of West Taiwan divide. Yeah, I went there.
A Great Wall of Winnie the Pooh's Wonderland divide.
Mm-hmm. between people who are just coming into a certain game or whatnot, and people who are veterans, and the idea of having a pipeline between those two is either dismissed by the veterans or is provided but provided inadequately, which doesn't exactly help the problem. And I've said in the past, handholding is certainly a problem, and that deserves to be called out. But its polar opposite, in my not so humble opinion, does not get as much hate, does not get enough hate that it deserves. And that is what I call hand braking, and what TV Tropes calls guide damn it.
Which we've also harped on.
Mm-hmm. Hand braking, and this is not, I want to make this clear, this is not something limited to tabletop. Both tabletop and video games have this in some form. So you will all have some sort of story on this that will come to mind, I guarantee it. Hand braking, the opposite of hand holding, is when certain obstacles are presented to players where the solution is not one that could be reasonably come across without prior knowledge. A lot of point-and-click adventure games are notorious for this shit.
Anything, I mean, the Hitchhiker's Guide original point-and-click adventure game.
I'd say every King's Quest game I've ever played.
I mean, most point-and-click adventures from, like, the 80s and 90s, I think, pretty much qualifies in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we mentioned God Dang It from TV Tropes, Monk. I think a good thing to go over here is just the first paragraph. If I can read that out. So, the entry guide Dang It on TV Tropes says, games often have puzzles to solve and hidden secrets to uncover. A game may try to provide hints to the player in order to lead them in the right direction. Other times, a game may present a scenario to a player where the correct set of actions is not obvious and no information is given to the player on how to proceed. Short of spending countless hours trying every remote possibility until something happens, the only way the player may figure out how to proceed is to consult an external source, such as a strategy guide or online walkthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And they have variations that may not actually be guide dang it. The note specifically says, a guide dang it is an instance in a game where the game fails to provide sufficient information, hints, or otherwise to a player that could aid them in solving a task or discovering a hidden in-game element. Mm-hmm. If the game does provide a hint that's reasonable enough to locate and decode, it doesn't qualify. Considering that something may fall under one of these other tropes instead, such as, is the information found in a game manual, then you need to RTFM, which is read the fucking manual. Does the game only inform you what to do in a single text box that doesn't pop up again? That's not guide dang it, that is more, why doesn't this information repeat or get recorded somewhere? And the trope for that is called, now where was I going again? Does the game provide enough information to solve a puzzle, but the information requires unconventional or obtuse logic to figure it out? Now you're dealing with a moon logic puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Does the game halt your progress and require you to solve a bizarre, irrelevant puzzle that can be reasoned about? You might need to solve the soup cans. I get that one. Did you have to die or fail a section of the game several times until you find the correct answer? You might be able to overcome this with some trial and error gameplay. Or did you have difficulty with one part of the game that seemed otherwise doable without a walkthrough? It could just be that one side quest or that one puzzle. Similar to that guy, except in puzzle or quest form.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the one that we're actually going to be talking about later, does the game describe its systems in an inadequate or misleading manner? That would be a tutorial failure.
Mm-hmm.
But guide dang it as a concept, or hand braking as a concept, is basically something like crouch by the wall with this item in Simon's Quest 2.
I was just thinking that. Oh my god, that's one of the most infamous moments in retro gaming.
Yeah, and that one I believe was more a hardware limitation translation issue thing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because you did get hints for it, but the translation was wrong, so it didn't give you the proper hints, and it didn't make it clear what you were supposed to do. It just said like, do this. It just said do this random thing that just didn't make sense. And even when you did figure out like, that's what I was supposed to do. That's what it was telling me to do.
Yeah, sometimes the wind is strong at the west cliff or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think was the hint. But now the Guide Dang It trope page does point out that Guide Dang It can occur for a multiple sets of reasons, such as the developers may have not intended for the task to be obscure because they assumed the players would make a connection that seemed intuitive during playtesting, or they forgot to include the instructions or hints in the game, or it even does say translation errors. So, and then there's this last one that I think this would be your mileage may vary at the moment. At other times, the inclusion of a Guide Dang It is very much an intentional part of the gameplay experience. It may add replay value to a game where players discover a new secret they didn't catch previously. It can also give a game an air of mystery that gets fans theorizing and figuring out that the empty room actually isn't so empty after all.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'd also like to throw into the problem. So many of those old demos on demo discs or convention demos or the like, with that screen. You know, the one that tries to shove all of the control setup on one screen while it's loading.
I hated those things.
You got maybe 5 seconds to go through the whole thing.
Hey, now loading times are long enough that you can read the whole thing. I don't know if that's an improvement.
Which, if it's for, say, a beat 'em up, okay, fine. You're not going to be dealing with anything that complex. If you're dealing with something like, say, a mech game, like when I did demos of Armored Core 2, that's a fucking problem.
Yeah.
I think developers learn from that, actually, because I remember that if there is a screen that shows the whole controller layout to you now, you see the loading bar at the bottom, the loading bar fills up, and then it gives a prompt of press button to continue. So you have time at that point to read your control schema.
Yeah. The tricky part with teaching a player how to play their game is walking that fine line between not telling them anything at all and hand-holding them through everything and not letting them learn how to play the fucking game. And I actually want to give an example, and I want to give a shout-out to, of all people, Aaron Hansen of the Game Grumps for this one, back in his days as Ego Raptor. The original Mega Man X. The game is designed without any tutorials, but the level layout of the intro stage is designed in a way that you will immediately start to pick up on clues just by fiddling around a little bit at first and then moving forward and learning as you go.
Yeah, the lemons!
Yeah!
But aren't you riding on cars?
Ride on cars! Yeah, but that to me, I think, is usually the sweet spot you want to go for. Now, sometimes you do have to have a tutorial prompt pop up every now and then. I think God of War did a good job of that, where whenever you reached a point where you needed to learn a new mechanic, it would just give you a brief prompt at the bottom of the screen while you're still able to play. So that's, oh, I can do this. Cool. Let me do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's a good fine line there.
Yeah, and it didn't do it constantly all the time, like the opening of as much as I love this game, the opening of Batman Arkham City is rife with these little pop-up boxes telling you how to play the fucking game. Like, okay, I get it. Okay, I get it. I fucking get it. Ah!
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, it's funny. I bring up Mega Man X1, but later Mega Man X games literally forced you to stop playing so you could read a text prompt to teach you about a mechanic. That got people pissed off. Like, you did this right before!
What's even more what's even more annoying about that concept is on replays.
Yeah. Because you now that you know how to play the game properly, especially if you've played it, you've mastered the game, you still got to get to those fucking tutorials. It drives you nuts. You know, you should always have the option, if you're going to put those kind of tutorials up, at the very minimum, have the option to turn them off.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of modern games actually have that. They have like the tooltips or tutorial pop-ups in the options menu that you can turn off.
Yeah.
The long tutorial to Kingdom Hearts 2, Dragon, is a good one, actually. Playing as Roxas for the entire opening of Kingdom Hearts 2 teaches you everything you need to know about the game through the side jobs you have to do. It teaches you that juggling is now a thing in the game. It teaches you a bunch of stuff. And you don't get like a bunch of prompts or text boxes about it. It's actually a good one.
I would agree with Dragon that it is a little too long, perhaps, but I do also agree that like it's not hand-holdy about it. It's just long as fuck is the only problem it has. Condense that down a little bit, maybe it'd have been better, but otherwise, keep it as it is, because it did teach you the mechanics, usually in fun ways, without feeling like it's just, stop everything, you have to learn how to do this one thing.
Well, Destiny Islands in Kingdom Hearts 1, while not as long as Twilight Town in Kingdom Hearts 2, was still fairly long. And that was the tutorial for Kingdom Hearts 1.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Condense it down to that length, and I think it'd have been fine.
I think it was because of the fact that they were trying to integrate more story that got stretched out, rather than anything having to do with mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So I don't think at this point it would be a tutorial issue at that point, but more a story flow one.
Yeah, no, you're right on that.
There is one other example in shooters that I can think of doing this kind of thing right. And I know some people will look at me and go, "Why are you bringing that series up?" And that is the original Modern Warfare in Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I'm specifically referring to the CQC test.
Mm-hmm.
What was basically a glorified obstacle course to get you to move and shoot between different spots.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Other games like System Shock 2 also kind of did the same thing, where you had this whole training round you could go to, but the beauty of it is if you'd already beaten the game before, you could just skip it entirely and just go right into the game.
Yeah. You could skip the CQC test, but people made a whole game out of trying to go through the thing as accurate and quickly as possible.
That reminds me of the tutorials in like the Splinter Cell games. They were always like an obstacle course you could get through, and like there was even that one secret where you could get up into the observer's booth, and I believe it was Splinter Cell 2. Having this in-universe reason for training is actually a really good thing, and they always became skippable as well. If you knew the course, you didn't really need to do it. You could just walk through it to the exit, and the characters would say something like, "Are you sure?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, okay, you know you best."
And the best part about it is, with those kind of training areas, it made it fun to learn how to play.
Yeah.
Instead of it just being a bunch of text boxes teaching you stuff, no, you had to actually go through it and learn it, so that you understood exactly how the mechanic worked, versus trying to figure it out on the fly when you're getting shot at.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When it comes to action games, I think one of the earliest examples I can think of that has a tutorial where you are experiencing the mechanics rather than just having them explained to you is Tomb Raider 2, where the tutorial is an obstacle course set up in the back of Croft Manor.
Yeah.
And it's like you'd learn to climb up boxes and cargo nets and jump from place to place and all that fun stuff.
And instead of being part of the main game, it was actually a separate mode. So you didn't
Yeah.
you could just start the game outright and not have to do it at all, or you could go, oh, okay, I've never played this before. Oh, there's a training area. Let's go ahead and start there first.
Yeah, it was completely optional, but it was right there. There and there was at least like I believe a sign, like signs with little icons on them that showed you like cross equals jump, or stuff like that. And it also taught you like hanging from ledges and how you could shuffle on them, and climbing up stuff and jumping from ledge to ledge, and knowing how running affects your jump. And like the obstacle course in Tomb Raider 2 was a fucking genius idea, like just brilliant. Also, Dragon, not knowing the consequences of your choices beforehand is a common staple of story-driven RPGs. That's not unique to Kingdom Hearts.
Mhm. But since I brought up the CQC test, I should also bring up its successor, the Gauntlet in Titanfall 2, which makes perfect sense since Respawn is filled with a bunch of ex-Infinity Ward guys.
Mm-hmm.
So of course
It's
they'd
like
revisit
they
the well, and in the process, the speedrunners got a hold of it, and discovered a tactic known as frag boosting, which is exactly what it sounds like. But the Gauntlet is there to teach you about the enhanced movement, with both double jumping and wall running, as well as firing on the move while doing both. I think the record for it is about 30 seconds, and getting through it in 30 seconds is not easy. I think there's records of like 4.8 seconds or 10 seconds, but those are tool assisted runs, so I don't count that.
Yeah.
Nothing against tool assisted speed runs, but different kettle of fish.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Tasks are meant for entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are, and they're not. That's what makes it fun. Just seeing how much you can break the game when all bets are off. Whereas with normal human speedruns, it's about seeing just how skilled the player is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it reminds me of that. As a side note, it reminds me of that task done at an early GDQ, where they got through Brain Age as quickly as possible, using drawings by a task that sometimes weren't the answer at all, but counted.
Oh my god, I remember that. They had fun with that one. I loved that. It was so freaking funny. But yeah, when it comes to, that's the thing with tutorials, is that you have to walk that fine line between, being a game that doesn't teach you anything and just throws you out there. Good luck there, buddy. You're going to need all the help. You're going to figure it out on your own. Or say, well, since I have it on the splash screen anyway, fucking Undertale, where the joke is it handholds you literally and figuratively throughout the opening part.
Yeah.
But that's just Toby Fox being a shitlord, as usual.
Yes, that's the whole joke. I mean, that's why the goat mom's name is Toriel. Tutorial.
Yeah. And of course, at the same time, there are ways where you can teach the basics and still fail. This is a problem that I've had with a lot of tutorials when it comes to fighting games, up until the last decade. Is the fact that a lot of times they will just tell you, okay, this is the button to punch, this is the button to kick, not tell you any of these. Sometimes tell you the special moves on that little marquee board if you're lucky. But the thing it doesn't give guidance about, and just as you thrown into the pool and told you swim, damn it, is in regard to how to make things intersect, like what a character's playstyle is meant to emphasize. Now, yes, this is something that will eventually come to you if you play enough sets, but as we've talked about in the past, that's not something that you should be relying on when it comes to teaching people. And I think that's why you have the stereotype of certain fighting games being for the ultra sweaties.
Can't imagine which game you could be referencing there, Monk.
The funny thing about that is I'm referencing a bunch of games at once.
Oh, I know.
I ain't exactly hurting for choice when it comes to this kind of thing, but
I'm looking over at the SNK crowd personally.
I see your SNK crowd and I raise you Virtua Fighter. Tell me when I'm telling lies.
I see your Virtua Fighter, and I raise you specifically to the Blaze Blue Chrono Phantasma.
Yeah, the point is when you're dealing with games like this, there's a whole lot of intersection, and what I would consider the nadir of teaching people the basics on how to play the game and still failing at a tutorial is about every MOBA that I've played, except for one, in the last 20 years. And
let's just pick the most toxic one.
Yeah, let's throw League under the bus. I haven't slandered League of Legends enough. Look, for those who play a whole lot of League and are good at it, no shame. I do not kink shame.
We don't hate the player, we hate the game.
But
literally,
all that the tutorial teaches you when it comes to Summoner's Rift is just how to move, how turrets work, how to win the game, and how to use the basic hotkeys.
Yeah, your QW and R.
Yeah. And only doing that with one character. And not telling you any of the endless amounts of traps when it comes to the stuff you can buy with the gold you get in the shop.
Yeah, I was about to say, the tutorial does not cover literally the most important part of the game, how to kit your character.
Mm-hmm.
For that, you have to watch literally hours of YouTube tutorials. I mean literally hours for not just one character either, because you can't just play one character all the time, because there in Summoner's Rift, the opposite team gets to choose to ban certain character choices, and well, your character might be banned. Then what? Better be good at someone else. Better know how to build them.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it does not teach you at all how roles work. Like, tank in League is not going to be the same as tank in a RPG. Jungle is obviously a role that's unique to MOBAs. CC is another role that's unique to MOBAs, and you're going to hear that terminology get thrown about, and if you're just coming into this, you've got no fucking idea what any of that means.
I would say CC is not unique to MOBAs, and in fact was in MMOs first, Monk.
It could be argued as such, but CC in the context of MOBAs is going to be different than CC
absolutely.
In the context of MMOs.
Yes. Yeah.
The point I think we're trying to get at here is that there is specific lingo terms, certain classes and things like that, certain roles you play that the game doesn't teach you. So the only way you're going to learn how to actually properly play the game and actually get good at it is, as Zan said, watching tons of freaking tutorials on YouTube and probably overwhelming yourself with so much fucking information it'll blow your head off. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give everybody a good example of this. The name of the role that Monk said was unique to MOBAs, the jungler, which it is unique to MOBAs. The name sounds self-explanatory, right? You go into the jungle, or the wild part of the map that doesn't have lanes, to kill the ads there and get world buffs and stuff, right? Wrong. That is one of your 3 roles, or 3 major goals as a jungler. Sometimes 4 if you're an ADC jungler, but I won't get into what an ADC is.
I forgot about ADC when it comes to talking about roles that are not going to be intuitive.
Yeah, we're not going to get into ADC right now. That's not only is that a whole kettle of fish, that's a whole kettle of fish on Venus.
Mm-hmm.
But the jungler's 3 primary goals: go into the jungle, kill ads to get the world buffs, assist any lane that is having issues as on an as needed basis. When people are like, hey, trouble on top, you're supposed to go top and help them out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one, opportunistically assassinate any enemy players you can see. The jungler, yes, they're a guerrilla. They're basically a guerrilla fighter. They are a guerrilla fighter on steroids, and you had better be good at multitasking.
And again, that's essentially 3 roles in one, role.
Yep.
And that is certainly a problem. And there's also the fact that there are certain archetypes that certain heroes are going to be fulfilling that may not be completely obvious to somebody coming in. And I do want to make clear, I'm not saying that I want these kind of things handhold and explained in great detail, but I've always found it funny when Riot or similar companies talk about how they need to address the toxicity problem, when the toxicity problem in games like League is a self-inflicted wound. And the solution to it is very, very simple. And it's a solution that shooters have had since 1998. Bot matches. Labbing. Yeah. We've known about this for decades now.
Paladins had bot matches, I'm pretty sure.
I think Paladins did. Heroes of the Storm did. In fact, I'd say of the MOBAs that I played, Heroes of the Storm was the most noob friendly in terms
HOTS
of
is the most noob friendly because no matter what you choose as you're leveling up, your build is viable, and it isn't dependent on a very specific item purchase process that has loopholes or traps.
It's based on a talent system, the way you'd level up in an RPG.
Mm-hmm. And that level is shared amongst your team, so everybody doing everything is pushing towards that.
Yeah.
HOTS was, some called it the anti-MOBA, as I like to say,
mm-hmm.
because it did so many things that most MOBAs did not do that it didn't feel like a MOBA. For example, it made map objectives, things like in things that were exceptionally optional and just made for a higher advantage in normal League Summoner's Rift maps. Actual viable strategies in HOTS, especially since some maps the only way to win was to do the map objectives, like the StarCraft 2 map where you have to build up your Zerg rush and then send it out against the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't win by just destroying whatever the Nexus was. You had to Zerg rush them, which was really interesting and fun.
Yeah.
The way HOTS did things also, there was a very clear tutorial. Sure, you only got to play Jaina in the tutorial, but it wasn't Jaina you were learning to play. It was the mechanics of the game. Jaina was just the default hero you got for that particular tutorial. And then, most of all, ironically, one of the most toxic companies made one of the least toxic MOBAs. The community.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah,
Blizzard
the community.
People.
The community was so helpful when I used to play HOTS. I got some really cool suggestions for my main, the Butcher. He's really fun to play, and the abattoir mechanic that they had early on was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But these people were actually happy to help because they no longer had to worry about the minutiae of this item purchase system like in League. That is, if you buy the wrong thing in League, you've lost potential minutes of advantage, which is usually enough to lose a game in ranked. If you've really gone down the wrong item path and didn't realize until it was way too late, you might as well just quit. At least according to the toxic League fandom. Like, you went down a defense, and you're an ADC, you should have gone down true damage, rah, 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 rah. You will get people shouting like that in matches. on the chat even all the time. And it wasn't only until recently that League made it so that you could ignore the chat, like a few years ago. But this is an example of why the tutorial doesn't actually teach you the most important part of the game. And that's just, it's unacceptable. It causes any individual's gameplay experience to become one that is primarily of negativity. And Dragon points out, people who like using the term "it's not made for you" don't like when they are the people it wasn't made for and want the thing changed for them, and screw the fans.
That's just exactly the point I was about to get to. It encourages the wrong form of gatekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've talked about before, there's good gatekeeping and bad gatekeeping. This would be the bad kind, because it's, oh, you can't play this game with us unless you know every single thing about every single aspect of the game from the ground up. If you don't know everything, you're not welcome here.
Yeah.
One might even call that kind of thing a ivory tower.
True.
Yes.
But the big thing about bad tutorials is they stick in our craw. Bad guidance in general sticks in our craw, because this isn't just tutorials. This is there are bad ways to guide in a game even after you've been given the basics. I love this game, but I will absolutely shit on it for its bad guidance. Morrowind. Like, Morrowind, I love Morrowind, and Morrowind is full of freedom, and you can explore and do whatever the fuck you please. Which can also lead to you going to the giant volcano you see in the distance, say, hey, that looks cool, and then what, Monk?
The bane of my existence, not you.
Well, I'm the bane of your fucking existence. They're just the bane of your existence. Cliff racers, everybody. Fucking cliff racers.
I think I told you about the time that somebody installed the Hydra mod on the copy of Morrowind that I had and didn't tell me.
Yes, I remember the story. It's amusing to me.
For context, John, the Hydra mod is exactly what it sounds like with cliff racers. Kill one of them, 2 more show up.
Oh, God.
It doesn't take long before there's so many cliff racers it crashes the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the cries that they make live rent-free in my head.
But Morrowind's guidance isn't. And in certain ways, that's a good thing. Like, not having a waypoint on a map or a compass like that can really give for immersive gameplay. But when you look at the map, you don't see any of the cities even remotely marked on it. And it's only until you talk to someone who knows the direction a place is in. Like, them mentioning it in conversation is not enough. If they mention directions to it, then you might get an indicator on the map. When you open the map, you might see, oh, hey, a new city has been put on the map. And then you can travel in that direction towards that city. But on top of that, like when they're trying to tell you to get to certain dungeons or caves or whatever for quests, those don't get marked on your map until you go into them. They just tell you, oh yeah, there's this cave with this evil dude northwest of here. I need you to go kill him. You're like, northwest? And so, you do have those basic directions that you can follow. Northwest is easy to point at. But you'll miss that cave. I almost fucking guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
You will miss that cave unless you already know where it is.
I mean, even with later games in the Elder Scrolls series, even if you had the map marker, sometimes it took you a minute to figure out, like, okay, it's here somewhere. Where the fuck is it? But if you don't even have that, how the fuck are you supposed to find anything?
Trial and error. Like, I love Morrowind because it is the most bullshit Elder Scrolls game that's ever been made. Like, it was more bullshit than Daggerfall, though not nearly as big. And it's more bullshit than Oblivion and Skyrim in a different way. Being, you think that the whole, reinforce your smithing so that you can reinforce your enchanting, reinforce your alchemy, and doing that loop is powerful in Oblivion or in Skyrim. I laugh at you. I laugh at you because in 20 minutes, in the first 20 minutes of the game, knowing what I need, I can do the chain of enchantment, alchemy, smithing in a circle until my stats are literally too long for the game to render and it crashes. Oh, and the moment I try to step forward with an agility that high, do you know what happens? I'm off the map. Fuck you. My bullshit is stronger than yours. The custom magic system in Oblivion, the custom magic system in Morrowind, I can make a spell combining the 3 strongest elemental spells, God's Spark, God's Flare, and God's Frost. The 3 weakness to those, the 3 spells that inflict the highest weakness to those elements. Another spell that inflicts a weakness to magicka. And the soul, the soulbind spell, give them the largest radius, the largest travel time, and the highest damage. It costs me 100,000 magicka to cast, but that's okay. I have an arbitrarily long number that doesn't render anymore in mana. And I can fire it at the ground, wait for the loading screen to come back. Everybody is dead, and every soul gem in my inventory is filled with their souls. Fuck you. The bullshit in Morrowind is great. There's no guidance for it whatsoever. You discover these things as you play, which is fantastic, but holy shit, finding important shit is still hard to do in that game.
Yeah. If there's one thing to take away, is that this is a case where it's like with a lot of things, this is where the pendulum theory comes in. Although it's not, one might say it's not really a theory because they think theory is the equivalent of guesstimate. No, remember, theories are made of facts. And
theory in the scientific method.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's taking the facts that are presented to you and crafting the possible solution based on those facts.
Yeah. That's just a pedantic pet peeve of mine. But as you've said, if you swing too far, whether you swing too far to the left or too far to the right, the problem is you've gone too far. And this is something that can apply in this kind of situation, because hand-holding is a problem because you end up with the player feeling like a spectator in a game, and hand braking is a problem because you end up giving them a damaged experience since they have no idea what they're supposed to do, and you're basically putting a roadblock in front of them.
Indeed. And if I can add to this isn't just a problem for interactive entertainment either. Even in books, movies, and other things, that not having an idea of what the hell's going on, or having so much information shoved down your throat, can break the experience of trying to enjoy that entertainment.
You know what's been one of my biggest pet peeves in movies over the last 20 years? The opening exposition.
Okay, folks, not all of you can be Star Wars. It doesn't work.
At the very least, the reason Star Wars does that is, like a lot of things that Lucas was doing at that time, it is a callback. It is a callback to the old serial films. This is the same reason why the Phantom movie opens with "For those that came in late." The "For those that came in late" is an in-joke to the old serial movies.
Yeah, and even then, when Star Wars did it, yeah, it was a little. You probably could have shortened it a little bit, but it was just there long enough to set the scene, and then let the movie carry it from there. And you still got your world building, you still got your character building, you still got all the relevant information as you needed it. The movies that try to put these long exposition dumps in text form at the beginning of the movie.
I'm not talking just text form. I'm talking both.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking. I'd
opening
actually say
narrations in general.
Yeah, especially since a lot of that opening narration is for stuff that isn't going to play a factor until maybe the second act. So you're inadvertently spoiling the movie. This is why have you ever seen Dark City?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen enough reviews of it and summaries of it to know the movie.
Yeah, this is why nobody likes the theatrical cut, because New Line insisted on having that opening exposition by Kiefer Sutherland's character.
Which spoils most of the movie for you.
Yeah. And
instead of allowing for that mystery.
Yeah, it's also a case of the age-old thing of show don't tell. And in the case of books, I think a case of bad guidance is just when certain books decide to fall into the trap of purple prose.
I don't know that purple prose is a good example of bad guidance there, Monk. What I would consider bad guidance in book form of any type is a reveal, no matter what type of reveal it is, that doesn't feel earned because there wasn't enough lampshading, there wasn't enough signposting, there wasn't enough hint going in, enough hint that a truly observant reader could have picked up the pieces and pieced it together.
Example?
Let me think of a good twist that was not earned. There's that is. Do you know why this is hard, Monk? Too many, and my brain is full of fuck.
That and you don't read shit here. Books.
Exactly. I try not to read shit books. Sometimes the book looks really good, and the summary is really good, and the first two or three chapters are really good, and then you get to chapter 15, and you're like, the fuck is this shit?
Yep.
And then there's the time that I read that's actually a good one. Then there's the time that I read the entire Twilight series just to make sure that my opinion was not a bias caused by information received out from outside. I prided myself on being a good scientist that didn't allow inside information or outside information to make my decisions for me. So I read all 4 books. Let's say that the twist of Bella becoming a vampire who doesn't feel the bloodlust the same way any other vampire does, and B immediately takes to her powers with no difficulty. That is a completely unearned outcome. However, that's not a completely unearned outcome because of lack of information. It's just unearned because it's a goddamn Deus Ex Machina, which could be seen as a bad form of guidance as well. But in the same series, the twist where Jacob imprints on her daughter, that wasn't lampposted at all. Imprinting wasn't even a thing until that moment. It's also very fucking creepy.
Yes.
That whole book series, she just needs to not write anymore.
Yeah,
but that's besides the point.
I'm just shocked that another thing that we end up sharing is the fact that we forced ourselves to read through those fucking books for very similar reasons.
You both have my sympathies.
I would rather you suffer with us, but I won't even subject you to that, John. Making people
even
read
you have your standards, sir.
Well, no. I have my bottom line. My bottom line is I don't hurt my friends as much as I've been hurt. I save the worst pains that I've experienced for my enemies.
Well, then I'd just be glad that I have not ended up on your shit list that hard yet.
If we're being serious for a second, John, you never will unless you, threaten to kill my mother or something. So...
I don't plan on killing anybody in my lifetime if I can help it, so I think I'll be okay.
I think you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
But, no, there are... And even in good books, there are twists that... Actually, I will use an example from a good book. A book I love. It is the 7th book in the Sword of Truth series. Let me get the title because I remember it's the 7th book. I just don't remember, The Pillars of Creation. And the reason the twist is not earned is it takes the viewpoint of people that we haven't been following for the first 6 books for 3/4 of that book until the people we have been following for the first 6 books eventually show up. And the twist is involved in that. It feels like the whole twist was flipped on its head at the last moment. And because every hint we got, every clue that was given to us insisted that one character that we were of the 2 that we were following from the first 3/4 of the book was definitely going to be the one to attempt the assassination on Richard Rahl, the main character of the series. And then when he shows up and they go to do it, it isn't them at all. It's the other character that we've been following the entire time. And it doesn't make sense for them to do it. And it doesn't make sense for them to try it because Richard sees right through them and kills them anyway. It's a bad twist, and it really made me kind of sad for the conclusion of that book. The book series are amazing. There are some low points in it, but that was probably what I considered the lowest point of the series, and that's what I would also consider bad guidance.
Yeah. Now, we have to, when it comes to bad guidance, it would be very tempting for me to point out this or that entry when it comes to wargaming. I would go so far as to say 90% of miniature war games out there in the market are guilty in one form or another of bad guidance.
I think that largely has to do with how much crunch war games tend to have, though, Monk.
I think it's also due to the fact that you've got a fair bit of interconnecting parts. But there's also the fact that every major faction in a lot of war games has their own dedicated book, whether it be referred to as a codex in Warhammer Fantasy or 40k or 8. Well, it's Battle Scrolls in Age of Sigmar, but I digress. Or just referring to them as an army book or a faction book. There's never really... A lot of the stuff that's given is lore on the faction, the different units, the lore on those units, and the stats of those units. But never any suggestions on building an army at a certain point value, or combinations that can work with each other, or units that are built to proc into other units.
So I think the problem there, Monk, is unit composition in a war game that has multiple factions is going to change on a faction by faction basis. Mm-hmm. As in, let's use GW here for a second because it's probably going to be the most identifiable for people. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're playing Imperial Guard. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're playing the meat shield of the Emperor. Your unit composition is going to be different between when you're facing Space Marines, when you're facing Tau, when you're facing Necrons, when you're facing Tyranids. The unit composition is going to be completely different. There's going to be some core similarities maybe, but the things that you're going to want to bring are going to change between each of those factions. Making build suggestions like that would be... I think it's excluded due to the fact that it would be so mired in the minutiae that it would be too info-dense, and then it would have the exact opposite problem of hand breaking.
I would say a potential compromise in that regard would be do's and don'ts of playing a given army.
Mhm.
Like think since we're using Imperial Guard, keep at range and pepper. Don't charge into melee like an idiot. You have vehicles that have ridiculous range. Use them to just harry them and carpet bomb them. Not try and charge and get in melee.
Mhm.
And it's not saying that you can't get in melee as an Imperial Guardsman. It's just a Guardsman against a Marine equivalent. Who's winning that? But, and I will note in that same vein, when it comes to the guidance thing, I do give a little bit of slack towards things like grand strategy games and 4Xs, if only because of the fact that they have a whole lot of moving parts, and they tend to have to be far more extensive with their tutorials.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so look at say any of the Civilization games. You have to deal with how conflict is going to work, how the tile system is going to work, how time is going to work, and especially how the tech trees are going to work, as well as things like dealing with politics, dealing with military, and the like, and
dealing with nuclear Gandhi.
Yes, and Montezuma telling you no because he's a douche. I will admit that's part of the reason why I'm fond of Alpha Centauri, because you don't really have that problem. You kind of can't.
My favorite thing to do to Montezuma in Civ games is to try and make sure that his own faction gets the equivalent of Montezuma's Revenge. For those who don't know, Montezuma's Revenge is a nasty form of dysentery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But also, Dragon saying, when do we get a video game where we play as Mildred battling against the forces of chaos? He seems to be pointing that question at you. It's like, we're not video game designers.
Well, I think he's more asking, when do we get a video game where you fight me?
Why would I do that?
Why would I do that?
At the very least, why would I do that without giving anyone advance time to promote it as a pay-per-view?
Yeah, you see, we've had this question in one form or another before. Here's the answer. We will fight as soon as you pay us, and it has to be a lot. We have to be the title card. John, you can be one of one of the other acts on the card if you want.
Besides, if I'm and of course, if I'm doing that, I'm gonna make sure to actually show up. What do I look like, Tonka Saw? Talking all that shit and can't even show up for his own fight.
We'll both show up.
Yeah, we'll both show up and make it a time limit draw so we can screw all the betters.
Don't give away. You're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud, Monk.
Oh, they don't know if I'm telling the truth or not.
I don't know if I'm acting or not.
But point is, it's I do think that a lot of people who are veterans of a given game or given work have an issue with perspective when it comes to reacting to this tutorial issue, because I think a lot of them through the process of time forgot that at one point they were a noob and aren't able to see that perspective, and it's something Zan and I have been mindful of, because that same crowd who forgets that they were a noob at one point is usually downstream from the full-on elitists. I'm not saying everybody who has that mindset is an elitist, but one can lead to the other.
Yeah. Can be a pathway. You just have to be mindful.
The problem with that sort of elitism, that sort of ivory tower, is in cutting everybody else off that is of the non-approved variety. It leads to stagnation. And also, Dragon saying, can't believe Waffle House doesn't have a beat 'em up game. Give it time. I'm pretty sure there's unofficial ones. I mean, there's a Waffle House arena in in several WWE 2K games. So the idea that it's not that it's not going to get an unofficial game through something like Beats of Rage or a similar open source affair, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of... And Barbara's like, why Waffle House? If you don't know, look it up. I'm not going into the details.
The most recent meme was a Waffle House employee deflecting a chair that was thrown at her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And hell, even the Macho Man is not immune to the power of the Waffle House fight. Granted, that one... got a little bit out of hand, and he was kind of being a dick.
Well, it's Randy Savage. What the fuck do you expect?
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's, the 70s and 80s, Monk. He was probably also coked up.
Yeah, I should note that fight took place in pre WWF Macho Man.
Yes, like I said, 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. He was probably coked up.
Yeah. But the point is, it is important to have that guidance so that you can turn beginners into veterans. Calling back to that whole Great Wall of China issue that I mentioned beforehand, where it's like there isn't a pipeline for people who are getting into it and want to get into it more beyond just play more matches, which I don't think is all that satisfactory when it comes to building people into becoming veterans of a given game, hobby, what have you. Because it's basically telling them to bang their head against the wall until something cracks.
Whether it's the skull or the wall depends on how much rage they have.
Mm-hmm.
But the more important part, not just of turning someone who's a beginner at the game into a veteran in the game, especially when it comes to the world of tabletop, which is what this was originally going to be following, but we realized it's too widespread to just be for us to just focus on tabletop, is that every game is someone's first. Every game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the right guidance in there, not only have you soured the experience of your game for them, you may have soured the experience of TTRPGs in general for them. And that is a massive issue, because if the first impression of tabletop in general is a poor one for a person, they may not seek out playing it again in the future.
Yeah,
that would be a waste.
I talked about that when I elaborated on why the fails of the Power Rangers RPG drove me so furious. Because I could easily see that scenario playing out. And unfortunately, I have.
Anyone who watched that Geekwatch, try to determine who's the most angry out of me, John, or Mildred. That's a trick question. We're all at infinity plus 10.
Yeah, we were all pretty pissed off at that.
Especially since it seemed like such a no-brainer to do, and that they found a way to do everything wrong. But
that reminds me of Weird Al at that point.
That's a very good segue into the guidance problem when it comes to TTRPGs, because in that situation, the guidance problem is similar to what we've seen in video games, much to the chagrin of the Ivory Tower once again, who really don't like bringing the two together and want my head on a plate for it. And the guidance issue that you, not the guidance issue, but the fact that especially with some games more than others, that the hyper focus on the new player experience creates a double-edged sword. Now, yes, with some games, one could argue that there's a lot of moving parts, so doing proper guidance, it would be more difficult, much like what Zan said earlier with war games. And I'd say that comment with war games could also apply to card games. But I don't think that's enough of an excuse to not try.
You just got to find the sweet spot.
And I don't think the sweet spot is as needle in a haystack as people think it is.
It's a range, so no, it's not a needle in a haystack.
John, you've been in my campaigns about since I got roped into doing RV tabletop all those years ago. I think there's been a total of what, 12 different games I've had you go through.
Yeah, I've lost count.
I know that there's only been about four or five in the Cloister of the Dice era, but there were I'd say around 12 in total. That's including both minis and full campaigns. But even if one of those full campaigns we never finished, which I think one of these days I will revisit, but it'll be with a different system.
Yeah.
Is the fact that with some of them had their difficulties, but you're able to take to them very easily, which I think is a fine counter argument to the whole, oh, it's hard to get into new tabletop.
No, it's one, depends on the system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the system's completely broken, it doesn't matter how good you are, but that's a fair thing, honestly. Two, it depends if the DM is actually teaching his fucking players how to play the game. You know, when we first started, yeah, we'll skip past Ryder because that was a whole broken mess anyway. That's not even a fair comparison.
Mm-hmm.
But let's take a look at Numenera, for example.
Yes.
You know, Numenera, I think, was a great example of, it's a brand new system using mechanics I had never seen before in any other tabletop game prior to it. Whole new setup and everything. But yet, the way you explained it to us and the way that you eventually incorporated and worked it into the campaign, it did not take us very long to get the gist of what we were supposed to be doing and how to really take advantage of the system for some cool moments. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that hard.
Well, and I think the important part to note there is that if I know Monk, most of what he would have explained to you would have basically been just paraphrasing plain text in the book. While it would have been a little bit more dense and a little bit more trial and error if you had just to play from the book, Shades, I still think it would have been fairly easy for you to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but again, it's the fact that he was able to help guide us into that.
Mm.
That is what we're getting at here. He guided us into things and showed us what we needed to understand immediately, and then the rest just kind of flowed in.
Yeah. The reason I'm pointing out that most of his guidance would have just been things you could read from the book is because that indicates that the guidance exists as part of the system rather than more being a part of Monk's skill, though Monk's skill at guidance is quite adept.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a two-pronged system. And that's how a lot of the... Again, some of the guidance should come from the book, to teach you the bare basics. But then it also helps to have a DM who understands how that game works and can see the intricacies for themselves, and then explain that and guide their players based on what kind of character the player wants to play.
Mm-hmm.
Help use those basic mechanics to teach the player, to kind of guide them in the right direction.
Yeah. And obviously there are going to be some games that are easier to do this than others. Like I said, I'm never running Phoenix Command again. But I point that kind of thing out because there's a narrative that gets thrown about that it's too hard to get people to learn a new system. I do not agree with that. I'm not saying that it's ridiculously easy to do it, but a lot of people exaggerate the challenge as if it's a Herculean task.
Well, I mean, if I have to point it out here, I how many new systems have we introduced the guys to through the Cloister one shots? 5 already.
Yeah.
like not even counting the stuff we got for the main series, Emberwind and then Sword World.
Mm-hmm.
But there was Lone Wolf Fists, there was Heaven and Hidden Heresies, Veil of the Void, there was Cloudbreaker Alliance. I feel like I'm forgetting one.
Sake.
Yes, Sake. Yeah, which I think the problem we had with Sake was not a guidance issue. It was more a this roll fucked everything over issue. But the entire fact that we've been able to introduce our party to multiple systems and they take to them very, very well is an indication both of a source material that is easy to digest, combined with a GM who makes the source material even easier to digest.
Yeah, and it's for this. Now, I will admit that there is one other reason that I wanted to do this guidance thing around TTRPGs, and that involves a certain gaslight that I've had to put up with off and on when I cover certain games. I had to put up with this gaslight when I covered Fabula Ultima, and I had this gaslight a little bit when I covered Candela Obscura the 2 times that I talked about it. And that is this idea that, because with both of those games, they are very, very narrativist. Meaning they put a much more emphasis on the table building a collaborative story together, rather than on a bunch of mechanics. They tend to be rules light and all that. This is stuff like Fate, PBTA, and all that. But the problem that I have with some of them is the fact that they use the story part as a bandage to cover things that are very, very vague and do not have sufficient examples. And when I pointed this out, I inevitably get some comment about how it's trusting that the table can figure it out, or I'd rather have it be that vague than have 200 pages of lore that I'm not going to use. I call this a gaslight because it's trying to insist that I'm making an argument that I'm not. Me wanting more guidance for these kind of things does not mean I want a massive lore dump.
Yeah. The big thing here is that the reason it's a gaslight is it's a combination of multiple logical fallacies, one of the biggest being the false dichotomy and the straw man.
Mm-hmm.
And what we mean by guidance is a few concrete examples of where the boundaries lie, so that then we can work within those boundaries, not an itemized shopping list in order to tell us exactly what we have to do. The big thing, especially with something like Fabula Ultima, because I know you're probably going to go into this in a second, so I'm going to steal your thunder for a second, Monk. Fabula Ultima's world-building pillars are so vague that building a world out of them, using the same selections from each pillar, is without some understanding of what the upper and lower bounds are, you're going to get what used to be called the end in old beta Minecraft, that jumbled mishmash of voxel blocks that make no fucking sense. The guidance we are asking for is take a look at the dashboard of your car. Well, no, that's probably a bad idea these days. Take a look at the dashboard of your father's car. Look at the speedometer. It's got a 0, it's got a maximum number. We want this range. We want this range, but we only really need to know what 0 and the maximum numbers are so we know what we're working with in that range. Mm-hmm. We don't need you to tell us 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., all the way to the end at 180, or whatever number your maximum miles per hour might be on your dad's car. Mm-hmm. We just need those bounds so that we can work within. And so a few concrete examples of the bounds have always been exceptionally useful. We always bring up the really cool thing done with the One Unique Thing pages in 13th Age, because they do give us the bounds, and then they also give us some examples of these are things that might be able to work with some really clever finagling if you need to, but these are the consequences that might arise from them as well. Whereas something like Fabula Ultima, the world, like I said, the world building pillars are exceptionally vague. When it comes to Fate Core, and most of its systems, we put Tianxia in its own bubble, far, far away. The aspects in Fate games are usually defined very vaguely, and they're part of what we call blank check design, where you're giving a player a blank check to do whatever they want. You need to give them at least some boundaries. That check can't be the size of the world. That check needs to be the size of a check.
Yeah. Now, since he brought up the 8 pillars for a bit of context, I'm going to be bringing those pillars up, as well as the pillars from a similar game, Beacon.
Okay.
To illustrate a bit of the context at play, and obviously between the two, I'd be more willing to recommend Beacon than I would Fabula Ultima. I know it's got a significant fan base these days, but I couldn't help but notice that a lot of people who are self-described fans of Fabula Ultima are people who, for them, this is
they're grogs.
Yeah, they're grogs, or of a different sort, or they're people who only know one game and don't know that the idea of doing Final Fantasy in tabletop form is far from a new concept.
Most of the people I see that stand Fabula Ultima without any criticism are the same people who stand Final Fantasy VI without any criticism. Final Fantasy VI might be my personal favorite Final Fantasy game, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the others, and that doesn't mean that I think Final Fantasy VI is some god game. Do not lump me in with the rest of you fucks.
Yeah, even I'll agree with that. Final Fantasy VI is my personal favorite, but it is the original version especially is a broken mess.
The magic evasion glitch that makes you invincible.
Or how about making your opponents invisible and then using spells to instantly kill them, even some bosses?
Oh, you're talking about Vanish X Summon. Vanish X Summon is great.
Yeah, so, yeah, I know it's flawed. I still enjoy it for what it is.
Mm-hmm. So, these were the 8 pillars in Fabula Ultima, and each of them had a short paragraph. But Fabula Ultima wants to talk about how it is a game where you can live out your JRPG fantasy in tabletop form. Remember this for later.
As long as that JRPG is Final Fantasy VI.
Ancient ruins and harsh lands, a world in peril, clashing communities, everything has a soul, magic and technology, heroes of many sizes and shapes. It's all about the heroes and mystery, discovery, and growth. See, those 8 pillars might sound like they very much fit.
Dude, some of the pillars sound like they should be rolled into each other, though. Such as heroes of every size and shape, and it's all about the heroes.
That is definitely the case. But the big thing, the point is that a lot of those pillars really only work if you're dealing with a certain type of fantasy. And as I've said before, fantasy is a very wide net, and that's where you have a bit of a problem. Some of the ones that are described in here could very much fit like the SNES era of Final Fantasy, for instance. But but as soon as you move outside of that, whether it be other console RPGs in that same generation, you wouldn't be able to apply this 8-pillar model to, say, Live Alive or Treasure Hunter G,
or Treasure of the Rudras,
or the original Tales.
God, I don't even think you could apply that to any of the Tales one. Let's be honest.
No, but I'm sticking with the SNES era to make my point. And obviously, we go into the PS1 era and try and use that with, say, FF7 and 8. This thing dies these pillars die at death. Oh. Now, this is where I have no idea what Barbara's on about. But this is
I think Barbara's making a joke based off of Ivory Tower's Waffle House and the 8 Pillars concept.
Yeah. Now, Beacon, by contrast, doesn't open up with some sort of 8 pillars in that same sense.
Also, if I remember correctly, Beacon is not claiming to be the game that can make your every JRPG dream come true, basically.
No, it very much has it does not have a world per se, but it does have a theme that it is building around and is dedicated to.
So its core concept is more defined.
And to that end, I'd like to read out a bit of the introduction chapter so you can get where I'm going with this.
Okay.
In Beacon, you create your own unique setting together called a reflection. Games of Beacon take place in the Source, a wellspring of endless potential and stories. While the true nature of the Source is incomprehensibly complex, it is often represented as a giant crystal with infinite facets. Each facet is a different reflection, and each reflection is a unique reality. While there are infinite stories that can be told within the Source, there are commonalities across its facets. The following are true of each reflection. The world is filled with action and adventure. All things are composed of aether, a magical element that comes in many varieties, including astral and lunar forms. Magic is widely available and has been combined with technology to create magitech devices. There are beacons, people who are great sources of inspiration for others, whether they are heroes or villains. There is a recurring threat to the reflection called Scourge. Crystals hold some significance to the reflection or its inhabitants. Ruins dot the landscape, ready to be explored. And I tell a lie. I forgot about the core principle list that is in the Game Master's Guide for the book, which contains some obvious things, but one of the big things it brings up is trying not to, it is not interested in modeling reality or real world physics, specific over general, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing is that it's not trying to say you can do any kind of console RPG with this. In fact, it very clearly has a theme that it's building around. By contrast,
the Beacon dev team owes me money now. The concept of the origin and shadows and reflections have been mine since 1993. You owe me money.
I'll tell Tim Gonzalez about that. But
tell him it's all mine, and I want it.
Yeah, but in the section in the GM's guide called "Designing the Setting," and by the way, I love that the PDF for Beacon has bookmarks, not just bookmarks, but also hyperlinks.
Of course.
And a bunch of side hyperlinks for the different parts of each chapter, which is very nice. is the themes, the topics that'll be most important, beacons, the role that PCs play, the scourge, the nature of the threat, crystals, the importance of crystals, aether and magic, the way magic works in the reflection, and ruins and dungeons, the nature of the ruins that wait to be explored. These things are vital for ensuring that there's a direction. Like I think both of you could use those pillars and theoretically make the beginnings of a setting out of them.
I mean, I absolutely could. I've already got 3, but that's that's just the thing that happens.
And every single one of those questions has every single one of those pillars has a few questions that are not meant to be directly answered, but meant to give thought, as well as a list of examples.
See, this is what we mean by guidance. They gave us the bounds, and they gave us some idea of how to work within those bounds, but they didn't just list everything exhaustively.
Mm-hmm. And well, I don't plan on running Beacon for at least a little while, because after the 1-2 punch of both Sword World and designing FF Legend, I do think I need to give myself some space from this style of play. Although, speaking of Sword World, that one could have been a nightmare if I had not made clear how things were explained. And John, would it be fair to say that doing the study hall helped put things into perspective about how different of an experience that was going to be?
I think it helped. I think it gave us an idea that, one, don't expect this to be like other games in terms of rolling mechanics and adding things up and everything like that. And to also not expect the classes to be what you think they are.
Yeah.
Remove that expectation of your typical class based on the world's most litigious tabletop game.
Mm-hmm.
So by helping us get out of that mindset and preparing us to try something new, it allowed us to more easily settle into things.
Yeah. And granted, some of that was already set in when we did Emberwind, because I think only maybe one class in Emberwind is analogous to the equivalent in the world's most litigious role-playing game.
Yeah.
That being
and I
the
think
warrior. Also
having that game behind us also prepared us as like, okay, we need to stop expecting certain things from certain classes now.
Oh. And how you ended up playing a spiritualist in the first half, and while the spiritualist could be argued to be leaning into some of into necromancy with some of its stuff involving the dead, it is by no means a necromancer. Just to use that as a example. I mean, Kay was playing the archer, but I distinctly remember telling Kay, this isn't going to be one of those cases where you just hang back and snipe.
Because every class had a long range and a close range weapon.
Yeah, that, and the archer in Emberwind is very much designed to be a switch hitter in that regard.
A switch hitter and a trick shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Think Legolas.
Yeah, I can go with that. And I've said this elsewhere, but weebs often tend to be my best students because of the fact that they don't have that expectation. They can play a barbarian and not expect it to, and not act surprised when the barbarian doesn't play exactly like a Conan XP. Because Lord knows a certain barbarian that we've referenced from Vox Machina certainly isn't Conan-esque.
No, he's something completely different.
Yeah. And same thing applies here. And guidance when it comes to player characters is just as important. I've had some people in that ivory tower claim that I'm way too extensive, and trying to run things like a director running a movie when it comes to the whole primer thing. That I should just let people improvise. But I'm also aware of the fact that some people need a push.
Well, on top of that, even in improv theater, the setting and the story are not left to improvisation. The story and the setting are defined, at least in the story and the setting are at least defined in broad strokes, enough that the improvisational actors have something to work off of. If you don't define the boundaries, then the improv doesn't know where to go. This is common sense, but as we continue to fucking realize, common sense is not common anymore.
No, and apparently we need to explain what resonant means.
I'm never going to let you live that down, pundit. I'm never going to let you live down the fact that you didn't understand what I meant by saying an RPG that resonates with someone.
Mm-hmm.
You were playing the definition game with a word that is self-explanatory to your own detriment, which is why you never fucking responded. Fucking coward.
Well, if he ends up making a video about it in a week or so, I'm going to pull an Asmongold on that.
You're bringing me along.
You were going to come along whether I'm bringing you or not.
Yes, this was not a question, Monk. This was a you're bringing me along.
Mm-hmm.
This was a statement of fact.
But and this is a problem that I've had with some games that do have extensive character creation. I'm not saying that doing extensive is a bad thing, but it's something that I think needs to be addressed. And I don't think it's a coincidence that there are whole threads just talking about the recommends and not recommends on places like RPG Bot or Giant in the Playground, or forums that have a bunch of optimization guides for different classes.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is due to the fact that there is so much of what is known as beginner's traps. Things that are very much bad choices that can seem appealing at first. But
and they were
good.
I was going to say, and that was a thing that became very prevalent in the early thousands with the release of 3rd edition and 3.5.
It was very prevalent there, but I'd also say it's prevalent in a lot of Universalist games, and even some superhero games. I'd say Mutants and Masterminds had that as a problem up until 3rd edition. And
you and I have both talked about how the fact that Universalist games had their own pitfalls just because of the limitations of them, and how Super's games are very much near Universalist.
Yeah, and when I say near Universalist, I'm saying it's about as near as I am to the lake near my house.
Mm-hmm.
And given, I will admit, when I did the study hall, one of the things that I really wanted to hammer home, and whether or not I was successful, I will leave that to you, is the fact that the Japanese tabletop scene operates on a very different philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, John. Would you say I succeeded at that? Because obviously this isn't going to be the last time we tackle Japanese tabletop.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, how we were already set to the expectation of don't expect this to be what we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, seeing that, these guys, Japanese operating under different rules, immediately clicked with us. Like, these guys don't play that way. They don't use a lot of the all crazier dice setups. They don't use D20s and D8s and D4 and D4s. I'm sorry, the caltrops.
Yeah.
They use strictly D6s because that's the most readily available. It's easier to just to have a pair of D6s because you can find those fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's just easier to build a game around that.
I didn't cover it at the time, but there was one bit of further context when it came to D&D's failure to keep the Japanese market. Because the original red box from the Beckme era, and I have to say that because there's like 5 different versions of first edition D&D, and that's before we even get into advanced.
Mm-hmm.
Did come in, but as that study hall pointed out, AD&D was not translated in Japan. At the time when Lodos was being done, it wasn't. It eventually was, but it was a long and extensive process, and unfortunately, it was too long because Tunnels and Trolls came into Japan, which was doing the same high fantasy thing, but using D6s, not requiring minis or that sort of grid combat, and in a much smaller book size.
Be right back, by the way.
Nice. So basically stealing its thunder. And yeah, that difference between the two has become more important with the recent release of the starter set for FF14's TTRPG. Now, opinions on FF14 as a video game aside, that's not relevant for this, but that game is very much designed the way a lot of Japanese tabletop is designed. Very mission focused, very very focused on the things that characters will actually be doing, rather than a bunch of incidentals for the sake of a verisimilitude that may not even matter, and just hand waving away things like lanterns or 5-foot rope or the like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm back, by the way.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
I wanted to get your thoughts on what I mentioned when it came to that bit of context on why D&D could lost its footing in Japan.
Yeah, it goes back to what I said, is that the idea of having to, like, the fantasy setting would have worked. We know this. I mean, half the freaking RPGs that came around were doing fantasy stuff. But to me, the one thing that always comes back to is they like things simple. They like to keep things simple and straightforward. Everything's, by the books.
Mm-hmm.
And for most games, up until that point, D6s were all you really needed for most board games. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, as far as they're concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Very traditional. That's the word I'm looking for. They're very traditional.
Well, and then there's the I think the other big part about Japanese tabletop gaming is due to how the Japanese work-life balance cycle works, among other things, whether that's going to school and coming home or going to work and coming home. Time to play is scarce. So they focus much more on the smaller, bite-sized adventure type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So having something that's quick, easy to set up, and is more traditional when it comes to what tools you need, fits more of their style versus what D&D even back then was working with, where you had to have all this different stuff that takes forever to set up sometimes, depending on the size of your game, and uses tools that they're not used to having just lying around.
Especially in rural parts of Japan.
Exactly. If money's tight in your area, you're not gonna have a whole bag of different different numbered dice. You're gonna be lucky if you even have a pair of D6s to throw around.
Oh,
They make them easy though.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Plenty of woodworkers.
there was the other thing, and something else to note is that if someone was really strapped when it comes and couldn't buy D6s, there's an easy workaround. Pencils.
Yeah. Pencils are 6-sided.
Mm-hmm. I forget the name of the game, but I remember that there's a kind of ladder game that's used by throwing a pencil with numbers 1 and 2 on it.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the name of the game was, but I've seen it in various anime for my entire life. But there's also the fact that a lot of people aren't setting up in like their home or something like that. They're setting up in a karaoke room, for instance, which of course in that kind of thing time's going to be at a premium. That's why a lot of scenarios that I've seen could be done in less than an hour. Some of them 30 minutes, and there has been a slow shift to expand out of that, but that's only been in the last few years. When Zan and I covered Convictor Drive, which I would like to run down the road, but there is there is one elephant in the room I would have to address first. But that's using D10s, and that's not. On one hand, it's not common. On the other hand, it kind of is, because as I've said many times, the biggest foreign TTRPG in Japan is Call of Cthulhu, which uses the basic role-playing system, which is a percentile system. And obviously, nobody's going to be throwing around 100-sided dice unironically. I mean, if any of you did it, you'd probably be getting the stink eye from everybody. Or I'd just be going, "That's not a die. That's a golf ball. Take that thing out to the driving range." and for some of you who've attempted to play golf, miss the swing about a dozen times. Don't. Yes, I'm not. Even at my age, I'm willing to make golf jokes because, well, I attended a golf camp a long time ago.
A long time ago.
That, and I'm pretty sure we all ended up playing that one golf game in every bar ever. You know the one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that when it comes to guidance in the form of TTRPG, it does take multiple incarnations. And I'm gonna make a bit of a hot take. I honestly think that setting agnostic or setting-less games are not a good thing to introduce to people coming into the hobby. I think people coming into the hobby would be much better served with games that have a defined setting.
And I think I can answer why, because you need that immersion factor. If you're just starting out, you need a world to get immersed into to really draw you in, help you paint that picture. If you don't have that, you're just rolling dice for no reason, and it just feels boring. You need something that's going to make it engaging, to make it fun. And if you don't have that, you're going to lose them quickly.
It's also the reason. It also provides a lot of context for the various art and the various lore that you're going to see in a given book. And to use Sword World as an example, Sword World is not a setting agnostic affair. It has a setting, Roxia. We have various continents within Roxia, and within those continents, various regions. And in addition to that, because of the fact that it has a setting, it has the rules for how various parts of the setting work. Like, it is, as it was stated in those videos, it is medieval high fantasy with some elements of advanced technology that are used but not fully understood. That and the theme of building off of past civilizations. Between that, and you've got that. You have the whole thing with the sword labyrinth. You have the whole thing with the humanoids and barbarous. You have the way that demons are different, even though it resulted in one of the most infamous moments of that stream. Oh. I really hope that was some good chicken coops. Also, chicken coop. I just realized that.
Oh my god! God damn it!
And could say he really flew the coop.
Okay, you can stop now.
Yeah, I'll stop on that. But, a whole thing about demon waifus and the waifu hunter is gone for half of it.
He just. Oh, god damn it, Coops.
And-
What the hell, dude?
No, I'm not letting that go.
I would expect nothing less from you. You are the guy who holds Mike Shell's faults over his head like a guillotine.
Mm-hmm. More of a sword of Damocles, but point stands.
Take your pick.
Sword
Same
of
result.
Damocles hanging over my head.
I'd rather reference a country that actually won wars at one point.
How?
But look, I told you I hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are cremated equal. But when it comes to that, the big reason for that is for one, when there's already a setting, it makes the GM's job significantly easier because now he has a easier way to bring people in aside from you all meet in a tavern. If there's one framing device that is the most overused in TTRPG history, it is you all meet in a tavern.
Yeah.
Oh. And to use other examples, you don't have. It's instead of trying to do the whole world, the cyberpunk games largely focus on Night City and the culture within it. Not just the population, but the big hangouts, the different districts, the gangs and factions within them, which is enough for somebody to visualize the background that they could have. And to reference one that has been done in the temple in a previous incarnation, Legend of the Five Rings, when we did the Second City campaign. I know that was from quite a while ago, but I think you should remember that to an extent, especially given you had an excuse to use your dragon gimmick. But I do remember giving you the skinny of how the different great clans operated, and the relationship that the clans had with other clans. And I think the dragon thing was one reason why you picked playing as a Mirumoto. I think there were other reasons. And the same applied with several of the other characters. Although it was amusing to have Mike Shell playing a lion bard.
A lion bard.
Fortunately, that was one case where I think by that point Mike Shell had learned his lessons. Mostly.
Mm.
It's not like he wasn't creating something that would become a meme for years to come. I think the peak of that was still Varric.
Oh God.
Mm-mm. But by providing that setting guidance, you end up answering a whole lot of questions. Like, I remember playing D&D in my early days, and I was always asking, wait, why does the sorcerer have a list of spells? Why, and for that matter, why would a warlock have a spell list? Or in some cases, having a full-on spell book.
Yes, it makes sense for them to have like have that at the beginning as a beginner's guide to kind of teach them how to utilize the magics of the world. But if you're that advanced, you're making your own shit.
Oh, there's also the context that it's supposedly explained that sorcerers get their magic through their bloodline with some sort of being. whereas wizards get their spells through study. That's why I had asked why. The only reason sorcerers have a spell list is for the purposes of mechanics, but that creates a disconnect. And I have had people coming in when they just read how sorcerers are supposed to work and going, wait, why do I have to pick spells from this list? Why can't I make my own?
Mm-hmm.
Because a sorcerer is supposed to be literally born with their spells, and you look at a lot of magic user characters in say anime, especially ones that are explicitly called sorcerers, and it's not like they have a named list of spells at their disposal. If anything, their spells are treated just like another form of martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's ingrained in them.
Yeah, and I know it'd be tempting for me to bring up Orphan for the umpteenth time because I got to work my gimmick as the biggest Orphan fan in the temple. But let me use something a little more palatable. I'll bring up Nasu in Fairy Tail. I mean, yeah, everybody is some variety of wizard in that series, but you don't see him referencing a spell list in that sense.
No, he just ingrainedly knows what spells he has available to him.
Mm-hmm.
Same with every wizard in that world.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them don't carry around a book of spells. They just know what they're capable of. And often they're creating their own spells. They're creating their own magic. They just have a baseline magic system that they each utilize based on what elements or what particular magic set they have.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Natsu being a fire dragon, or at least his power is based on the fire dragon, he just knows that everything's fire based and dragon based, so he just goes off of that.
Mm-hmm. And of course, that's often why I've said to people that if you're trying to do this whole thing of adapting things like manga or things like console RPGs into tabletop form, one of the things you need to learn to let go of is this idea of martial and magical characters having this separation.
There really isn't one in East Asia.
And
as I talked about before, there are characters who do what's known as body refining, where they temper their bodies to the utmost, and they can still cause voids in space by punching.
Yeah, I've seen some people try and argue things that clearly are based or inspired by Western fantasy still have that dichotomy, but go back and actually look at, say, Record of Lodoss War or Goblin Slayer, and tell me that the magic users in that are doing the things that a D&D mage would do in terms of combat contributions. Like, to use Lodoss as an example, let's look at Deedlit.
Mm-hmm.
Deedlit is very much a magic user, a shaman, what would be reincarnated as the fairy tamer in 2.0 and 2.5. But that doesn't mean that all she does is hang back and cast, or is all that frail.
Yeah.
And if I have to use an example from say Goblin Slayer, that definitely doesn't apply to either the dwarf cleric or the lizard shaman.
We stand lizard shaman in this house.
I mean, the lizard man shaman is one of the is as much of a frontliner as he is a caster.
He's the other frontliner.
Yeah.
He and Goblin Slayer are the vanguard of the party.
Mm-hmm. And in the case of dwarf cleric, who who feels more like a fairy tamer than than a typical cleric, I would note, with his whole calling on gnomes to use his spells. Even though he fights he's more of a mid-range fighter than anything else, and he's still very dwarfy, even if he's not full Scots dwarfy. Mostly because it would be absolutely horrifying to try and filter a Scottish accent through a Japanese actor.
I'm not even going to try.
Thank you.
However, we'll still go into a Scottish accent just because we need one now.
But it was weird enough when Takashi Miike had a bunch of Japanese actors trying to speak English for Sukiyaki Western Django.
Hey, I love that movie. You take that shit back.
Oh, I love it too, but it is Miike. And Miike is insane.
When speaking about the Japanese entertainment industry, do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
Yes.
Good.
But I do now. Since you brought up Fate, I will note that there is one particular exception when it comes to Fate's lack of guidance, and that was Tianxia, because it actually had that for all of the aspects. Which is why when we talked about it, we put it over in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the the concepts that are core to a character, the aspects, in Fate Core just lists high concept, trouble, and then 2 others. And you have no idea aside from things integral to your character, you have no idea what those aspects are supposed to be. Which, to reference that line again, do you have any idea how little that narrows it down? Because what could be integral to one's character could be a word or a whole paragraph. And obviously, using a paragraph for an aspect would be a terrible idea. But there, and the big one, and to bring it to why this kind of guidance thing is important is, I think a lot of people either misunderstand unintentionally or willfully disunderstand. Because the common straw man that I see when it comes to wanting better guidance is wanting hand-holding or wanting things pre-packaged.
Yeah, no.
That is an extreme. That is, I won't say it's an extreme the other way. It's a fucking straw man.
What the extreme is what they think we want. They only think in extremes. It's either no handhold, no guidance, or all guidance. Where the rest of us are going, so we can't meet in the middle somewhere here where there's a balance? No, it's one or the other. Well, then fuck you too then.
I think in a lot of cases the argument is, well, you don't need any guidance. I didn't have any, and I was able to figure it out. To which I call bullshit, because they likely had someone else guiding them in the process.
That's always how it is. That they had to have learned somehow, and the only other option is they had to go through so much trial and error that it's ridiculous. And here's the secret, folks: not all of us have that much patience. Maybe we have some, but not that much.
And I've done hundreds of interviews on this channel, of course, and I'd say a large amount of the people, when they tell me the origin story, they got into the hobby through someone else helping guide them, or sometimes they stumbled upon it and then went through trial and error. But the problem with relying on trial and error as a solution is that you can fall back into a certain trap with flow theory. John, were you here when I talked about the flow theory chart?
I don't remember.
Imagine a graph on two axes, x and y. The x-axis is time. The y-axis is difficulty. If you go too far one way, you create frustration. If you go too far the other way, you create boredom. This is why the general idea is to have a smooth difficulty curve throughout, as close to the diagonal line as you can get. You're never going to get the diagonal line, obviously, but you can get close. This is also why difficulty spikes tend to stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Hi, Whitney and Gen 2.
Fuck you and your milk tank.
And I can hear some people in the distance going, it's fine as long as you prepare. That's not the problem.
You're missing the problem. You're missing the point here, people.
Yes.
Even when you're prepared, it's still a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's also the Clefairy that she has, but who cares? But
nobody remembers the Clefairy. Everyone remembers the milk tank.
But yes, if you know it's coming, it's not as much of a problem. But because difficulty spikes are often beginner's trap, operative word being beginners, that's irrelevant. And Zan, would you say that Souls-like do a good or bad job when it comes to guidance, or would you say it's up in the air?
I would say it's good. Souls-likes, and especially looking at the actual Souls games, they take the time to gradually introduce you to elements of the game, and then they drop you into a situation where, now that you know the base elements of the game, you get to gauge whether you know the elements of the game well enough to fight something that is clearly much higher than your weight class, or whether you're going to take the out that they gave you. Taurus Demon, not Taurus Demon. Or am I thinking Taurus Demon? The Erd Tree Guardian in at the very beginning of Elden Ring, there's always something big and nasty that if you think you have enough of a grasp on the mechanics that you just went through as part of the intro, you can try and beat it, and a lot of people do beat it. It takes them a few deaths until they get all the attacks and everything else. But the big thing about the Dark Souls games specifically, the Souls games from FromSoft specifically, and Soulsborne, because we got to include Bloodborne, is that they are meant to be a game of gradual improvement. Like, yes, absolutely. Is there a way to cheese the game and totally tear it apart from the inside out? Yes, and that's part of system mastery. That's something you can discover entirely on your own without ever touching a guide online, and do so very intuitively, because maybe you pick up this thing and you look at this thing and it says, oh man, it gives me plus 30% fire damage. I should try out fire magic. All of a sudden your pyromancer build starts. But a lot of the system mastery is extremely intuitive, and the basics of the game are really easy to pick up in whatever intro area they start you at. And it's a lot more like the Mega Man X example from earlier. They don't necessarily give you a huge amount of explanation. Maybe there's a couple of white signs on the ground you can look at, or if you're online, there's going to be a lot more, and there's going to be trolls and also advice. Lots more trolls than advice, everybody. Just remember, finger, butt, hole. That will never get old. Or jump here for treasure. But the way that the Soulsborne games teach their systems is intuitive. It is. I don't care who says the games are too hard. It's actually quite new player friendly. They just have to have going into these games, you have to have the mindset that failure is okay. And I think most of the people who claim game too hard, game bad, do so because they don't think failure is okay.
They don't apply a particular phrase that I've used for years, and one that everybody's heard in one form or another, and it is something that I do think needs to apply when you're approaching a game for the first time. So y'all finish this sentence. When you're in Rome,
do as the Romans do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only reason I don't play the Soulsborne games is my anxiety over that would be too much. And I fully accept that is a me problem, not a game problem.
Yeah. And the best part is that when you then go outside of FromSoft's Soulsborne games, because that's a very specific genre they've created for themselves, and then we got all the Souls-likes outside of it. You can then point at the games that aren't, such as Armored Core or Sekiro. Those games also have a very intuitive and organic learning process. I would argue that fucking Armored Core has one of the most intuitive and organic power-up processes in the game. I found new parts. Let's see how I can make these work together so that my robot does abnormally bullshit things on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does this. Literal build variety is a thing in Armored Core. Sekiro is a subversion of all things that are common between Soulsborne's and Armored Core games. Because Soulsborne and Armored Core games have multiple builds, and by creating certain builds, you can trivialize the game. Sekiro, you don't have a build. You have upgrades that help upgrade your health and posture, and upgrade your damage. You have a tool set that gives you some really cool utility tools to use stuff. That's your ninja tools. And you have the grappling hook, which is... I love that game. But at that point, the game's intuitivity now turns towards what is the core mechanic that helps me survive everything? Parrying? Let's fucking go! And you just run with it.
Very much so. And the big reason why I will always focus on this guidance issue is one of our mantras, and the one that seems to really get under the skin of the Ivory Tower retirement home, is we want as many people to experience as many different games as we can muster. Obviously, we're not having everybody play everything. We would never want to do that, and we never want to overdrain people's wallets. At least not any more than Steam Summer Sale does.
I already paid my penance this year. Did you?
Yes.
Surprisingly, I have not.
Oh, lucky.
But because of that, it's important to have that pipeline. I guess a good analogy is and I know a lot of people in geek circles find it blasphemous to reference sports in these kind of discussions, but I'm going to do that anyways because that's how we roll. Consider the fact that there is a pipeline into professional leagues, into professional promotions. In something like say a lot of ball-based sports, you have people who are going in through college, possibly going in through minor leagues, and then eventually into the pros if they manage to go through the ranks. In something like wrestling, let's use the Young Lions system as an example, John. You get recruited to go into the dojo. You start out as a young lion, or a young boy, or a green boy. A lot of the stuff you're doing is basically servant work for the seniors. Getting up earlier than everybody else, cooking for them, setting up the ring. Then after they do their training, you do yours and get run ragged. Then you do it again for years on end before you even get to perform in front of an audience. When you do get to perform in front of an audience, you're in black boots and black trunks, usually in some sort of multi-man tag match, and it's your job to get the crowd invested. Eventually, you get sent off to a promotion outside of Japan for excursion, whether that be Rev Pro, whether that be Ring of Honor, whether that be CMLL or AAA, basically someplace else to work on stuff that you can't work on in just the basics, and then eventually you come back. And you have that pipeline from someone being a beginner to being seasoned. This is why there's the whole thing with developmental systems. And I'm not saying that something exactly like that needs to happen with games, but does need to be a path that can foster people getting better at it, aside from just bumping their head against the wall and hoping it breaks.
Yeah.
Because that's, as I mentioned before, when there is that lack of guidance to bring people from amateurs into experts, that's what ends up creating elitism and creating the bad type of gatekeeping, where you're trying to gatekeep everyone, including people who may be window shoppers now, but tomorrow may be new fans. And if there's anything we've seen over the years, is that elitist attitudes, regardless of source or intent, very reliably lead to stagnation.
That's why we call it the Ivory Tower Retirement Home.
Mm-hmm.
No new blood means you're eventually going to die out like the fucking fossils you are.
Like, I remember seeing somebody going, why don't we have any good RTSs these days? And I'm like, we've got plenty. You're just not looking at them because you're spending all day pining for another StarCraft or Warcraft. And it's like, but those were really good. It's like, yeah, and there may be somebody else who's making something different that is equally good, and you can't see it because you're too busy looking at your own fucking reflection. You fucking Narcissus. With apologies to Lex Luger.
I actually find Monk more than StarCraft, Warcraft players who are looking for no good RTSs today. It's Command and Conquer stands.
Yeah, I was just using that as an example, but we've seen this phenomenon.
Yeah.
Or people acting like turn-based in TTR in console RPGs is dying out when there's no shortage of options on that front.
Hello, has anybody played Sea of Stars? Sea of Stars, anybody?
In fact, on my let me see how many turn-based entries I have in my PC library.
Enough.
At least 211.
In a row? I'm sorry, we haven't gotten a 37. I figured a 211 is close enough.
Yeah, well, and if somebody wants to say that there's a shortage of Metroidvanias,
this is the part where I look at you and go, there are so many Metroidvanias that people are complaining about the indie. Oh god, this gets me into a thing that happened to me a few weeks ago. Someone talking about how the gaming crash is imminent. Like, no, really, only the AAAs will crash, and not even all of them. And they're like, but the indie scene's gonna crash too. I'm like, no, it's not. Yes, it is. All it is
no danger.
But their complaint was, I don't want 5,000 pixel art or pixels. It was pixel slop pixel slop roguelike Metroidvanias. I'm like,
Most of the Metroidvanias that I have in my library aren't even roguelikes.
well,
No.
Monk, it was an overgeneralization because they're being dipshits.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, the indie scene is much more than just that, and you are ignoring it for all the wrong reasons.
There's that mindset of they just want the big names to keep putting out the titles they want. You're asking for the moon at that point.
Well, and the biggest thing here is that is by this sort of, we want things to always be the way they've been, is first of all anathema to our whole crusade against design by gospel, and second of all will lend itself further to the bad guidance issue.
Yeah.
Because
then the only games that'll be released are ones that don't have it, since they figure the only people who are buying it are the people who've already played them all.
Yep.
And again, that's where you get into the whole stagnation thing. And because of that, it's... I had said to one person who was doing that kind of thing, you've got a choice you can make. You can either sit here and bemoan that you are not that, you're not getting your utopia, or you can get off of the nail that you're sitting on and go to find actual solutions instead of just lamenting about a problem. Those are the two options you've got. So best pick before you get left behind like everybody else who's in that same delusion.
Yeah, you know what? I'll even give an example of someone in my own household that does that. My own fucking wife. All right? Mm-hmm. She was a huge fan of the Harvest Moon games. For the longest time, loved Harvest Moon. But Harvest Moon turned to shit, as we all know.
Mm-hmm.
So what does she do? She starts looking for other games similar to it. And good God, you should see how many farm sim games that woman has in her Steam library. Good fucking Christ.
I mean, not surprising. I sent her a farm sim game that was all predicated on frogs, so I mean...
Yeah, trust me, I know.
I know you know.
Aware, sir. Thank you, but fuck you.
Is she enjoying it that much?
Not really. Actually, she's been playing a game called Sunnyside lately. I
had to give Kay a present just because she has helped me. She has been a partner in crime for me against the monk a few times.
I know. That's why I say thank you, but fuck you. But no, she loves, and like you, she look like us. She looks for games that are easy to get into. And you'd think, oh, farming games, those are easy. No, there's sometimes some complex X mechanics, and it's nice to know how to learn how to play them.
Like Stardew?
Yeah, Stardew is the obvious example. That's easy peasy to point out as the number one example. But there are like so many other games, and even stuff that's not really farming sims, but fall into that same lining, like the My Time games, My Time at Porsche, My Time at Samrock. Of course, Coral Island being the big one. She was on the alpha for that game, and she is proud of it.
Yep, and it all has some fairly good guidance, right?
Oh yeah.
So
you can just jump right on in.
That's good. That is a good thing to see. That means they know that their games are complex enough to need the necessary guidance.
Coral Island, when it got released, it got some good attention on the streaming scene. There was a lot of people streaming Coral Island when it first dropped.
Mm-hmm. Oh. But if I have to use an example of what happens when you insist on that sort of elitism, I refer to what happened when No Mutants Allowed was asked to contribute to a potential Fallout 3. And they were such assholes that it almost killed the project dead. Simply because of the fact that they wanted to be their level of purists, and even other. There's a whole rabbit hole that can go in with No Mutants Allowed. They are if you're not familiar with them, Zan, they are I can describe them as a bunch of Maxines.
A bunch of bovines? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody will get that. Well, no, there are people who will get that joke and be laughing with us.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, that is as strong of a coda as we will have for these kind of things. So with that said, I do want to sincerely thank everyone who took the time to come in and enjoy the madness. We will be back here next week for Geekwatch with a different affair. In fact, let me check the calendar so I can see what we've got. Oh, we're finally covering that.
Let me see. Let me take a look at this. Let's see.
Ha!
The one time this is in my wheelhouse, and I'm only half informed on the subject.
It's okay.
You've got a week.
And I've got a whole bunch of other shit to do.
That's okay. I haven't watched either of them yet.
And there's I've watched both, so remember variety of perspectives is important on this.
I'll probably watch the movie one. I don't have the time to do the whole TV series one.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I've got that. Tomorrow, we will be returning for Parliament of Geeks to talk about It Invaded and why. If any of you haven't seen that, shame on you.
Agreed.
Like we kind of lampshaded what the grade is going to be, but we will be doing the grade regardless because consistency. Tuesday, I'm going to be talking with Mark Kern for the first time in about a year and a half. Since I want to try and give him the skinny on some of the OGL responses, as I've called them, because I've seen some people call them D&D killers, and don't fucking do that. That is the kiss of death.
Time.
Name me one blank killer that was actually successful. If my soundboard worked, I'd be playing the Jeopardy music right now. Because don't worry, those in the chat. I'll wait. I'm sure you'll come up with one eventually. But
I mean, I've already got one, but it's also a smart-ass answer.
Wednesday, I'm going to be talking with Jared Glenn on his Manifest campaign setting that is doing a bit of Weird West with tabletop. Thursday, Monarch and I will be properly diving into Mysteries of the Yokai. We had to stretch it up. We had to stretch the last episode a bit because I underestimated how short the page count was for the introduction. Or rather, how long the what is an RPG part of the introduction was, which I skip every time. Friday, Zan and I will be returning to Gubat Bunwa, continuing our look at the professions, and hopefully we have one that who doesn't have a power that involves taking themselves out. Although I'm pretty sure we will have at least one meme for each one that we find, because that has been consistent, and with some of them I think there's at least one that would be up your speed, John, if I ever run Gubat Bunwa. Obviously, Saturday will be the triumphant return of the Cloister of the Dice, as we begin to head towards the end game of Demon's Line. And next Sunday will be our next episode of Geekwatch. Oh, and I forgot to mention, at the end of Parliament, we're going to be spinning the wheel.
Yes. I already got a wish of 2.5 years. Maybe I'll get another one in a row. That would be nice.
Probably not, but we'll see. I mean, we are going to have to explain why we shit-canned the original plan midway through.
Yep, I know.
But that is a story for another week. So until then, on behalf of the Good Brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.
That's the wrong one. No.
내 조심기